My dear child, the waiting is breaking tonight. Somewhere, a heart that tried to move forward without you has finally admitted the truth: it never truly left you behind. And what your soulmate has decided now could change the direction of this entire love story. They are no longer asking permission. They are no longer waiting for everyone around them to agree. After everything that separated you, they have reached one powerful conclusion: they want to come back to you. Listen carefully, because the most important part of this message is not simply that they miss you. Missing you has happened before. Thinking about you has happened before. Even imagining a reunion has happened before. But this time something is different. A decision has been made. And once that decision settled inside their heart, the fear that controlled them for so long began losing its power. For months, maybe even years, your soulmate allowed other voices to become louder than their own heart. Family expectations, complicated circumstances, pride, misunderstandings, fear of rejection, and the opinions of people who never truly understood your connection all became walls between you. Every time they considered coming toward you, another reason appeared telling them to wait. But there comes a moment when a person becomes more afraid of losing real love forever than they are of disappointing everyone else. Your soulmate has reached that moment. Something recently forced them to look at their life without excuses. They began asking themselves a painful question: what if I keep listening to everyone else and lose the person I actually wanted? That question stayed with them. Late at night, when nobody was around to influence their thoughts, memories of you started returning differently. They remembered conversations they once took for granted. They remembered the way you understood things they never had to explain. They remembered moments when simply knowing you were there made life feel lighter. And then came the realization they could no longer escape. They didn't lose you because the feelings disappeared. They lost you because too many things were allowed to stand between those feelings and the truth. Don't skip this, because what happened next is where everything began changing. Someone close to your soulmate recently noticed that something was different. Your soulmate wasn't speaking about the past with the same certainty anymore. When your name came up, they didn't immediately change the subject. They became quiet. That silence said more than any confession could have. Eventually, someone asked them directly, if you could undo one decision, what would it be? Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. But inside, they already knew. You. Not because they believe everything between you was perfect. Not because they have forgotten the difficult moments. But because after everything that happened, they finally understand something they couldn't understand when you were still close. Some connections cannot simply be replaced. They tried distractions. They tried convincing themselves that enough time would erase what they felt. They may even have allowed other people to believe they had completely moved on. But privately, your soulmate kept comparing everything to something they once had with you. And nothing felt quite the same. Now the people who once influenced their choices are beginning to realize they are losing control over the situation. Your soulmate has started pushing back. When someone recently tried to remind them why returning to you would supposedly be a mistake, something completely unexpected happened. Instead of staying silent, your soulmate defended you. They said there were things about your story nobody else understood. They admitted that decisions had been made while emotions were high and important truths were still hidden. Then they said something that stunned the room. "This is my life. I have to decide who belongs in it." That sentence changed everything. Because your soulmate finally stopped treating their own happiness like something that required everybody else's approval. But there is another reason this comeback feels different. They have learned something. Something about the separation. Something about what happened behind the scenes. A conversation, confession, forgotten detail, or piece of information has made them question the story they believed when the two of you were pulled apart. And suddenly, certain events no longer make sense. Why were they told one version of what happened while you seemed to know another? Why did certain people become nervous whenever reconciliation was mentioned? Why did somebody work so hard to convince them that you had stopped caring? Your soulmate has started connecting those dots. And the picture forming in front of them is making them emotional. Because they are beginning to wonder whether both of you spent all this time hurting over something that could have been different if the complete truth had been known. Don't skip what comes next. Your soulmate isn't only thinking about contacting you anymore. They have been imagining the actual conversation. What would they say first? Would you answer? Would you believe them? Would you still have enough room in your heart to hear their side? These questions frighten them, but for the first time, fear isn't stopping them. Because one thought frightens them even more. What if they wait again, and this time they lose you forever? So your soulmate has quietly made a promise to themselves. They will no longer allow pride to write the ending of this story. They will no longer allow other people's opinions to make the decision for them. And they will no longer pretend that walking away from you brought them peace when deep inside they know it didn't. But before they take that final step toward you, there is something they believe you deserve to know. Something they should have told you a long time ago. And when you hear what they have finally admitted about the day everything changed between you, you may understand why this time, nobody can stop them from coming back. What your soulmate has finally admitted is far more emotional than anyone around them expected. For a long time, they allowed people to believe that walking away from you had been their choice. They acted strong when your name was mentioned. They pretended the distance was necessary. They made everyone think the chapter was closed. But behind that carefully controlled silence was a truth they were terrified to say out loud. They never stopped wondering whether leaving you was the biggest mistake of their life. And recently, that truth finally came out. It happened during a conversation that was never supposed to become emotional. Someone close to your soulmate brought up the past and casually said, "Maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to happen." Your soulmate immediately went quiet. Then, instead of agreeing like they normally would, they said something nobody expected. "No. Some things happened because I listened to the wrong people." The room changed instantly. People who had always believed your soulmate would never question the separation suddenly realized something serious was happening. Your soulmate wasn't defending the past anymore. They were questioning it. And then your name was spoken. For a few seconds, nobody knew what to say. Your soulmate looked down, took a moment, and finally admitted, "Should have talked to them directly. I should have asked what was true instead of believing what everyone else told me." Those words carried years of regret. Because now they understand how easily love can be damaged when two people stop hearing each other and start hearing everyone around them instead. There were conversations you never knew happened. Opinions you never knew were being whispered. Warnings your soulmate accepted without questioning where they came from. And there may have been moments when you were waiting for them to reach out while they had been convinced that you wanted nothing more to do with them. Imagine the tragedy of that. Two people possibly waiting on opposite sides of the same silence, each believing the other had already walked away. But something has now exposed the weakness in that old story. Your soulmate recently heard information that contradicted something they had believed about you for a very long time. At first they dismissed it. They didn't want to reopen old wounds. Then another detail surfaced. And another. Until avoiding the truth became impossible. Someone finally asked the question nobody had been willing to ask before. Did you ever actually say those things? Or did somebody tell us that you said them? Your soulmate froze. Because suddenly they couldn't remember hearing certain things directly from you. They remembered being told. They remembered being warned. They remembered being persuaded. But they couldn't remember hearing those words from your mouth. That realization hit them hard. Now your soulmate is looking backward with completely different eyes. Moments that once seemed obvious suddenly appear suspicious. Decisions they once defended now feel rushed. And people whose advice they trusted are being questioned. This is why their return feels so powerful. They aren't coming toward you because they are lonely for one night. They aren't coming because another relationship disappointed them. They aren't coming because someone pressured them. They are coming because they have finally started separating what they truly felt from what other people convinced them to believe. And what remains underneath everything is you. But there is something else happening. Someone in the family has realized your soulmate is serious about reconnecting with you, and they are not happy about it. The moment they understood your soulmate might actually contact you, they tried to interfere again. They reminded your soulmate of old arguments, they brought up old mistakes. They warned them that reopening the connection could create chaos. But this time your soulmate didn't back down. They looked directly at that person and said, "You already had your chance to tell me what to do. Look where it got me." Nobody expected that response. Because the version of your soulmate who once avoided conflict is changing. The version who stayed silent to keep everyone comfortable is disappearing. They have spent too long living with unanswered questions. Too long wondering what could have happened. Too long waking up with your memory and going to sleep pretending it didn't matter. Now they would rather face an uncomfortable truth than continue living inside a comfortable lie. And this is where something deeply emotional happened. Later that night, your soulmate found something connected to you. Maybe an old photograph, a saved message, a forgotten note, a gift they never threw away. Something small enough that nobody else would understand its importance, but powerful enough to bring an entire chapter of their life rushing back. They held it longer than they intended. And for the first time in a long time, they allowed themselves to remember you without fighting the emotion. Not the separation. Not the arguments. Not what everyone said afterward. They remembered you before everything became complicated. Your laugh. Your presence. The conversations that seemed ordinary then but feel priceless now. The strange comfort of knowing there was once somebody who could understand their silence. And your soulmate finally whispered the words they had avoided saying, "I still love them." Nobody was supposed to hear that confession. But someone did. And instead of criticizing them, that person said something your soulmate desperately needed to hear. Then stop letting fear decide your life. Those words stayed with them. Don't skip this moment, because this is where thinking about returning became a genuine decision. Your soulmate began considering exactly how to reach you. A message? A phone call? A conversation through someone you both trust? They even started writing something to you and deleted it because the words didn't feel strong enough. How do you explain years of silence in a few sentences? How do you say, "I should have believed you"? How do you admit, "I let other people influence something that belonged between us"? How do you ask whether there is still a door open without knowing what waits on the other side? Your soulmate doesn't have perfect answers. But they have finally understood that waiting for the perfect moment is exactly what kept them away for so long. So now they are preparing to take the risk. And strangely, the closer they get to doing it, the calmer they become. Because even if your answer isn't what they hoped for, they need you to know the truth. They need you to know that you were never as forgotten as you may have believed. They need you to know that your absence changed them. Most importantly, they need you to know that the story you were given about why they walked away may not have been the whole story. There is one particular truth your soulmate wants to tell you personally. They refuse to let anyone else deliver it. They don't want another person translating their feelings. They don't want another misunderstanding. This time, they want the words to come directly from them to you. But just as they were preparing to make that move, someone from the past discovered what they were planning. And that person became frightened. Not because your soulmate was returning, but because if the two of you finally speak honestly, a secret that has survived for years may come out with them. That fear did not come from nowhere. The person who became nervous knows exactly what could happen if you and your soulmate finally compare what each of you was told. For years, the distance between you protected certain people from uncomfortable questions. As long as you remained separated, nobody had to explain the contradictions. Nobody had to admit what was said behind closed doors. But one honest conversation between the two of you could change everything. Your soulmate noticed the nervousness almost immediately. Suddenly, someone who had barely mentioned you in months wanted to know why your soulmate was asking questions about the past. They wanted to know whether contact had already been made. They even tried to convince your soulmate that reopening old memories would only create more pain. But your soulmate heard those warnings differently this time. Instead of feeling afraid, they became suspicious. They asked, "Why does it bother you so much if I simply talk to them?" There was no clear answer. Only excuses. And that silence told your soulmate more than words could have. They began remembering the exact period when everything between you changed. There had been confusion, emotional conversations, and decisions made too quickly. At the time, your soulmate believed they understood what was happening. Now they realized there were gaps. Important gaps. There were things supposedly said by you that they never heard directly. There were messages they assumed you had ignored without knowing whether those messages ever reached you. There were moments when somebody claimed to know exactly how you felt, even though nobody had actually asked you. Your soulmate finally saw the pattern. Too many people had been speaking for both of you. And not enough truth had been spoken between the two people who actually mattered. That realization became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate decided they would no longer investigate the past through other people. If they wanted to know what you felt, they would ask you. If they wanted to apologize, they would apologize directly. If they wanted another chance, they would have to find the courage to say it themselves. And that is exactly what they began preparing to do. They sat alone and started writing everything they wished they had said years ago. At first, the words came slowly. Then everything poured out. They wrote about regret. They wrote about the nights they almost contacted you. They wrote about the times your name appeared unexpectedly and completely changed their mood. They admitted that even when they acted as though life had moved forward, a part of them remained emotionally attached to what the two of you never finished. Then they wrote one sentence and stared at it for a long time. "If I had known then what I know now, I would never have walked away from you." That sentence broke something open inside them. Because this was no longer about nostalgia. It was about accountability. Your soulmate finally understood that returning to you cannot mean pretending nothing happened. They cannot simply appear and expect everything to become beautiful again. They know trust may need to be rebuilt. They know you may have questions. They know you may even be angry. And they know they have no right to demand that you immediately open your heart again. Still, they want to come back and tell you the truth. That is what makes this moment different. Before, they wanted you but feared the consequences. Now they understand that real love sometimes requires facing those consequences. Someone close to them asked, "What if you don't want them anymore?" Your soulmate became quiet. The question hurt. But their answer was powerful. "Then I will respect that. But they deserve to know I never stopped caring." For the first time, your soulmate isn't approaching this connection with entitlement. They are approaching it with honesty. And strangely, that honesty has made them stronger. The family pressure that once controlled them no longer feels as powerful. The opinions that once terrified them no longer sound convincing. Even the person who tried hardest to discourage them is realizing that something has permanently changed. Your soulmate has chosen to hear their own heart. And once that happened, stopping them became almost impossible. But then came the moment nobody expected. The person who had been acting nervous finally requested a private conversation. They told your soulmate there was something about the separation that had never been explained properly. Your soulmate immediately asked, "What haven't you told me?" The person hesitated. Then they admitted that years ago, when everything between you was falling apart, information had been deliberately withheld. Not necessarily some dramatic conspiracy. Something painfully simple. A message. A conversation. A chance for the two of you to clear everything up. Your soulmate's expression changed instantly. They asked whether you had tried to reach them. The person couldn't answer directly. That was enough. Your soulmate stood up. Years of confusion suddenly turned into one overwhelming emotion. Not hatred. Not revenge. Regret. Because if there had been even one moment when you tried to reach them and someone prevented that truth from reaching them, then your soulmate knew they had spent years believing an incomplete story. They demanded the entire truth. No more protecting feelings. No more excuses. No more, "We thought it was best." And eventually, the confession came. There had been an opportunity for reconciliation. You had not been as indifferent as your soulmate was led to believe. Something you said or attempted to communicate had never been presented honestly. Your soulmate could barely process it. They walked away from the conversation and sat alone. Then the tears came. Because suddenly they weren't only remembering you. They were remembering all the years that might have looked different. All the birthdays. All the holidays. All the ordinary mornings. All the conversations you never got to have. They couldn't recover that lost time. But they could decide what happened next. And in that moment, your soulmate made the decision everyone around them had been afraid they would make. They were coming back to you. No family vote. No permission. No more waiting for someone else to approve. They picked up their phone. Your name was still there. For several seconds, their finger hovered over it. Their heart raced. Everything they had wanted to say suddenly felt impossible to fit into words. Then they began typing. They deleted the first sentence. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, they stopped trying to make it perfect. They wrote from the heart. A simple opening. An apology. A request to talk. And one confession they had carried for far too long. But just before they were ready to send it, another message appeared on their screen. It came from the very person who had finally revealed the hidden truth. There was one last detail they hadn't confessed. And after reading it, your soulmate realized the separation between you may have started much earlier, and very differently, than either of you ever knew. That final detail changed everything. Your soulmate finally understood that the distance between you had grown from misunderstandings, outside influence, fear, and too many words that never traveled directly from one heart to the other. But instead of allowing that discovery to create more anger, they made a different choice. They chose truth. They chose courage. And most importantly, they chose to stop running from what they still felt for you. Your soulmate looked at the message they had written and realized there was no perfect way to repair years of silence. There was only an honest way. So they stopped deleting the words. They stopped worrying about what the family would say. They stopped imagining every possible rejection. And they finally admitted to themselves, if I don't try now, I may regret this for the rest of my life. This time, nobody else's opinion was going to make the decision. Nobody could frighten them into silence again. Nobody could convince them that their heart belonged somewhere it didn't. They knew returning would not magically erase the past. They knew forgiveness could not be demanded. They knew you would have the right to decide what happened next. But they were finally willing to stand in front of you with nothing hidden. No messenger between you. No family speaking for them. No assumptions. Just the truth. And the truth was simple. They never completely stopped loving you. Your absence taught them what your presence once meant. The separation taught them what they should have protected. And losing you taught them that some decisions become heavier with time instead of easier. So your soulmate made one final promise to themselves. Whatever happens, they will hear the truth directly from me. The next chapter doesn't have to be rushed. It doesn't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. If two hearts ever meet again, they can meet with clearer eyes, stronger boundaries, and honest conversation. Because coming back is only the beginning. What matters is what happens after the door opens. And somewhere tonight, your soulmate is no longer asking everyone else whether they should walk toward that door. They already know what they want. This time, they are ready to follow their own heart. This time, they are ready to speak for themselves. And this time, if they finally come back to you, the decision will belong to the only two people who should have been making it all along. You and them.